two aspects of resource efficiency, circular economy, and climate. So if I turn to you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting. I think everyone should take the earphones because my answer will be in Russian. Говоря о циркулярной экономике в странах Центральной Азии, наверное, первое, что нужно отметить, это важный момент, что все наши страны являются странами развивающимися, поэтому вопросы, наверное, увеличения производства объемов продукции, рост населения, он, несомненно, будет сказываться и на вопросах циркулярной экономики. Вместе с тем, когда мы обсуждаем циркулярную экономику через призму, наверное, сокращения выбросов парниковых газов, в частности, вот отвечая на ваш вопрос, включены ли меры циркулярной экономики в наши NDC, либо где-то в законодательстве предусмотрено, то твердо можно сказать, при разработке NDC, АНУВа нашего, мы шли идеологически, включали меры циркулярной экономики. То есть это и сокращение потребления, удельного потребления на человека, сокращение природных ресурсов, удельное потребление природных ресурсов на конечную продукцию. И все эти вопросы там же в NDC были включены, в том числе развитие renewables, переход на устойчивый автотранспорт. При разработке стратегии по достижению углеродной нейтральности, допустим, вот сегодня много говорилось о сокращении, наверное, потребления в сельхозсекторе, то и в данном контексте предусматривались меры устойчивого земледелия, землепользования в сельском хозяйстве. Поэтому в этом ключе определенная работа проводится. Также хотелось бы отметить наш в 2021 году утвержденный экологический кодекс, который, в свою очередь, содержит пятиступенчатую иерархию вопросов управления отходами, да, где только в последнюю очередь мы должны утилизировать и постоянно стараться вернуть во вторичное пользование ресурсы. В частности, в реализации этой политики мы на сегодня Международный центр зеленых технологий и инвестиционных проектов разрабатывает соответствующие справочники по наилучшим доступным техникам, да? И в этих справочниках как раз-таки отражены техники, к примеру, в справочниках по горно-металлургической деятельности отражены специальные техники, которые позволяют доизвлекать из отходов, из выбросов, доизвлекать полезные необходимые ресурсы и направлять их во вторичный оборот, во вторичное пользование. Поэтому в этом направлении работа идет, но несмотря на это, глава государства в прошлом году в своем выступлении, в своем послании отметил необходимость более внимательно отнестись к вопросам циркулярной экономики. И вот, готовясь, наверное, к сегодняшнему мероприятию, обратил внимание на отчет о разрыве цикличности The Circularity Gap Report, где отмечено, что в настоящее время мировая экономика является цикличной всего на 7,2%, что ничтожно мало, наверное. Да? Мы давно говорим о необходимости внедрения принципов циркулярной экономики в политике наших стран, но на сегодня результаты являются таковыми. И здесь, наверное, самое важное нужно понять, что развитые страны, наверное, ввиду того, что у них уровень дохода очень высокий, соответственно, и потребляемость ресурсов в этих странах, она также намного выше, нежели в наших странах. И говоря о сокращении как выбросов, так и отходов и внедрения принципов циркулярной экономики, я думаю, как раз-таки нужно начинать в первую очередь от крупных потребителей, организаций и крупных стран. Спасибо.
Great. Thank you so much, Oljas, to providing that. Probably we might be able to link it when the points that mentioned by Hans. Let's move into the second round, and probably we can elaborate a little bit more. Now, shall I turn to Achala? GGGI has been focusing on green growth, and in my introductory phrase, I mentioned the Central Asian countries is demonstrating a flair as well as a leadership in green growth. And of course, green growth is so much linked to the discussion we had so far, the presentation, as well as what Hans mentioned, the circularity, the resource angle and the climate angle, both is important. I would like to ask your experience in terms of how the countries are looking at this integration, and what sort of examples that you draw from the region, the Asia and the Pacific. Of course, you cover Central Asia as well, from that point of view.
Thank you, Ranga. First of all, thank you to EU Switch and also the Central Asia Pavilion for hosting us, and also the invitation for me to speak here. This is my second panel here in this pavilion, and I can say actually it's very nice, because in some of the other rooms you can't hear each other, so this one is much nicer. Thank you. GGGI, I don't know how many of you know about us. We are the Global Green Growth Institute led by His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, and our head office is based in Korea, and my office, Asia office, is also in Korea. And it has been such an honor to really have our discussions with all Central Asian countries here at this COP, as well as before, to really think about how we bring in more green growth elements, green growth practices to the 5 Central Asian countries. So currently we have Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan who are members of GGGI. Apart from Uzbekistan, the other 3 countries joined recently. So I'm still in the process of establishing offices and developing the programs. So this discussion, I think, is very timely, because sustainable consumption and production is an area that we can look into in terms of our programs in the countries. In Uzbekistan, I mean, we talk about sustainably using resources for both production and consumption. And what my experience in Uzbekistan is, when the resources are so scarce and so limited, you have to be sustainable. There is no other way. We have a project in Karakalpakstan in Uzbekistan, working in the RLC area, looking at the agricultural practices and really trying to help the area and also the small businesses to bring in sustainable agricultural practices, and looking into the scarce water resources and bringing in sustainable practices like drip irrigation, etc., and to help the country to build the agricultural practices in a more sustainable manner. And we are also helping the country to for 5 value chains to provide technical support for access to markets, and that is our work in Uzbekistan. So and the other point I want to mention is, I looked at the NDCs of all 5 countries in preparation of this meeting, and what I see is that there are bits and pieces in all NDCs related to sustainable consumption and production and circular economy, as the 2 gentlemen also mentioned, that there are areas in which in the NDCs where they look at the circular economy practices. And in Kazakhstan and I think Turkmenistan NDCs, they are much more visible, bringing in the circular economy practices. And then I looked at the policy framework of these 5 countries, and policies are also there, but not in a very organized manner. They are scattered, but really touching on sustainable consumption and production as well. So what perhaps now is needed is more systematic thinking. And maybe the next round of NDC preparation is an opportunity for us to really think about bringing in sustainable consumption and production into as I mentioned, into a systematic thinking, and also perhaps develop the project pipeline, which is bankable and at scale. And I think so many of the COP participants have heard me saying what's most important right now is not just the policy document, not just a strategy, but a bankable at scale project pipeline. And I think we perhaps next round of NDCs, we think from the end point of the whole whole process, if you think about A to Z of, doing all the consultations and data analysis and all that, endpoint is the project pipeline and bringing in private investors and other investors on board. Perhaps we need to really start thinking about that pipeline. And that's something that I'm very, very eager to discuss with the Central Asian countries and see how we work on that. One example I also want to bring in, because we are talking about a coalition of countries, group of countries, not one individual country. We do have a similar piece of work in Southeast Asia. So all 10 countries we are covering for solid waste management, and also looking into sustainable consumption and production as well, and developing a regional strategy for all 10 Southeast Asian countries to increase, improve, and work better on SCP. And we are based in Korea, as many of you know, and I mentioned, and the plastic treaty negotiations for next year is happening, and they are really taking it very, very seriously. So this, I also think, is a very good opportunity for us to think about potential cooperation with the Korean counterparts and how we may bring in investments related to SCP in Central Asia. So I'll stop here. Thank you, Ranga.
Thank you so much, Achala, to highlighting not only the options we have with the upcoming NDC enhancement as an opportunity, but some of the existing, the policy and work. Zinaida, I would like to build on that. Achala mentioned that there are reflections of SCP aspects in NDCs, and of course there are ICP policies, of course, but it's not coherent and scattered. So policies can contribute to this integration. So Zinaida, from perspective of Switch Asia policy support, how can we support in terms of the coherent policies contributing to this integration? So from the program perspective and the support perspective.
I will offer a few mini examples which need to be coherently glued together, because, in the policy domain, our program is demand-based. We can trigger demands through the discussion with the regional organizations like CAREC or with the governments, but effectively what governments are asking us, we are looking there for the ways to respond. But 2 countries in the region, namely Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, already have asked us at the previous cycle of the program last year to assist them in the preparation of the Sustainable Consumption and Production Action Plan. So SCP Action Plan for Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan exists. The insights from these plans, from 2 of them, are already taken into the policies related to green economy. It is very, very new processes, so I do hope that it would lead to some coherence in the policy making and connections, because of course the previous installment of NDCs happened before these processes have happened. Here's a little thing in parentheses. So one thing is to prepare the policies, another is to implement it. What we see now is that increasing drive, not from the side of Central Asia yet, governments, but it will come, I'm pretty sure. Once governments ask us, say in Pakistan, in Indonesia, for ASEAN region, to prepare the policies, the second request comes, can you help us to operationalize it? So whether such request would come and it would help us to coherently connect it, well, we hope it would be, but we are on standby to do it. But some of the SCP action plans, roadmaps are there from our point as a part of the policy engagement. Second example is really quite related to work, Zafar, you shared, and I showed as an example. You know that a lot of grants in Central Asian countries are related to the tourism and energy tourism and sustainable consumption and production. So I think 4 out of 5 countries are supported across. What happened last year is Kyrgyzstan asked us to engage the grant participants or grants of Switch Asia. Those are people working guest houses, restaurants, hotels, etc., working on the ground to work with them to develop the circular economy policy for Kyrgyzstan. This work was through consultative process have been done, which creates some coherence there. What now we are considering whether we could capitalize on this experience and start working with the rest of the countries engaged through Switch Asia grants, exactly to inform the policies, maybe on the country level, maybe regionally, on circular economy in the tourism sector. This is something which could also be top down from initial sketch to operationalization of policy, or bottom up to bring insights from the practical aspects there. So those are just a few ideas, but I can speak maybe a bit later on synergies between different other technical advisories, which also we are working, for example, with CAREC on develop, on engagement, engaging the, or maybe I can say it right now, right? So we've got a very exciting request from CAREC to step in and continue support of a very, very important platform CAREC is participating. You have been through years bringing together parliamentarians from different countries, from all 5 countries of Central Asia, to discuss first issues of water, and for the last 3 years, questions of climate. Climate and disease are in their portfolio at the moment. So your request has been to us whether we could step in and help the parliamentarians and ministries of foreign affairs to work with questions of circular economy. Naturally, we would try to bring those two together. So we are currently working with you on the approach, and it would be very interesting for us probably to see how we can synergize through this and some other aspects of work. Yeah?
Okay, right. Thanks. Since Zinaida has a reference to what we're planning to do with CAREC, and there's a lot of reference to NDC in our discussions. Zafar, do you think NDC is a kind of an appropriate policy tool for us to do this integration between climate and SCP, or do you think any other options also are there? How do you see we have NDC in the forefront of this integration process?
Well, definitely, NDC is an appropriate policy document, policy instrument, reflect their intention in introducing these SCP practices. Also because NDCs are mainly related to climate change and mitigation objectives rather than SCP in particular. So NDCs are mainly related to climate change, and they are it is their indirect impact on SCP encourages, introducing these practices at the national level in their strategies, in their development plans, and so forth. At the same time, there is one very interesting point that Central Asian countries have unique, diversified economies, the geographies, even though they're all in one region. So one of the challenges will be reflecting or working with all 5 countries and introducing it into their NDCs, introducing SCP and circular economy practices in the NDCs of 5 Central Asian countries may require a tailored approach. Because implementing SCP will require a different approach with water, with land degradation, the questions related to sustainable agriculture. So therefore, each NDC of each country may be quite different. But the general approach on introducing the NDC, the SCP practices into all the NDCs of 5 Central Asian countries is indeed an appropriate policy, which should be introduced. One more thing to bear in mind is the capacity, the available capacity in the region. There is still a little gap available in the complete comprehension of SCP practices. So before these practices are well reflected in the NDCs of these instrumental documents for the countries, a very good setup of coordination with the international organizations and with programs like Switch Asia is needed to raise the awareness about how these, what is the value of introducing these SCPs are, how can that be done, and it will be also important to open up a window of opportunity to get to learn from other countries how the other countries are doing and what the value is bringing this introduction to other countries. This may help in, quicker and easier introduction of these practices into the countries and NDCs. Again, I will want to go back to the very first point I made. It will have to be a diversified approach for each country because of differentiated geographical challenges they have within the region.
Right. Thanks. Anyway, yeah, I think it's really valid. I think that's the whole concept of NDCs as well, to make it bottom up so that the countries are in a position to mainstream or bring in their national priorities into their climate ambition. So I think it's really a valid point, and of course it's been recognized. So Hans, now at the international level, so you're working from the resources angle. I think you're trying to push the aspect of resource efficiency into this whole big climate argument. So from that perspective, from the top level, from the research level and the international policy making level, what we need to do for this integration? What can we do, and what role countries can play in this whole process?
Well, the Global Resource Outlook report gives a strong sense of direction there. There's a whole chapter on governance, which is catering also to the local conditions and to separate sectors. So it's not a one size fits all approach. That is clear. But institutionally, we should include resources much more in the other environment and climate issues. That is obvious. That has been mentioned. NDCs are one vehicle for that. There is no resource convention. There is no resource agency. I mean, it's sort of the orphan of this agenda globally, if you would think of it, yeah? And yet they play such an important role in the economy. Secondly, the report pays much more attention to distribution than the previous report. And I was very happy that you made a remark about high consumers, low consumers of resources, because indeed the report is very clear. If we want to provide a good life for 10 billion people on this planet, resource use will keep increasing, but it cannot increase. It should decrease in the high income countries, and it should also decrease for those having a high resource consumption lifestyle. And you find those across the planet by now. So it's these two axes that are really important if you want to think of it in that way. The group of countries that has been increasing the most in terms of income is middle income and especially upper middle income countries. And your region has middle income countries primarily and upper middle income. You're growing into that direction. So there should be a lot of attention there for this resource dimension. And if you look at regions, it's the region to which you belong, according to the UN taxonomy, that has, together with Asia, been the region where we see the fastest increase in resource use per capita. So there is a challenge for you there, but of course, taking into account the local context and taking into account, and that is a basic starting point for the report, that the whole goal of using resources is not to add a percentage point to your GDP, but to deliver well-being for the population. Yeah. So of course that ought to be the goal. We should decouple resource use in a way, not just from economic performance as we measure it, but from well-being outcomes. Do people have a decent house? Do they have healthy food? Is there enough infrastructure for healthcare, for schools? I mean, all the stuff that we think makes life worthwhile and that we think we all have a right to. And that is deeply embedded in the SDGs. If we want to reach it, focus on resources is a missing piece of the puzzle. So that is the key message from the report.
Thanks, Hans, to highlighting that. It's really good to get some hints what's the next global resource outlook is going to look like and what are the new features coming in. We look forward to get the new report. I think it will be released in next UNEA, I guess.
Yes, it will be presented at UNEA as one of the core reports, priority reports. It is responding to a number of the formal requests from UNEA. And so it's high on the agenda in the next UNEA. It will be translated, of course, in all the UN languages. We are finalizing, as of we speak today, the summary for policymakers and the key messages. And we would have a strong interest in also producing a summary for business leaders, because they need to understand the concept and frame it in their logic of investments, innovation, and the role they play. So we're looking at partners also to make that translation towards the business community.
Correct. Thanks. It's good, really good to link it up with business as well. I've been talking. Achala, you were talking about the scale, how to achieve this scale. Basically, I think we touch upon some of the challenges and opportunities to NDCs. But if a country wants to consider SCP, circular economy in these NDCs, what are the preconditions based on your experience in UN NDC development and enhancement process? Achala?
Yes. So in terms of scale, I as I mentioned before, I am linking this whole discussion to the bankable project development, and I'm linking this whole discussion to addressing challenges at institutional level in each country to really help them to work with on different financial models, for example, because the government funding or concessional loans or just grants are not going to be sufficient for this type of work, the economies at scale that we are thinking about. So a precondition for me is make the NDC, for example, the development plan of the country, and do the whole society approach, right? Bring in the whole society and really think in parallel, bringing in the private sector investments for the transformational that we would like to see happening. I was very interested to hear from Hans. The report is going to really talk about the equality aspect of resource consumption. We had this discussion long time in the UNFCCC process around carbon budgets, and we are still discussing that. So I would be very interested to see how this report is going to help us countries to think you know, what they need to do and how that can come in to the NDC preparation as well as other development plan preparation at country level. Policy coherence, I think, you know, of course we can bring in projects, but projects will be still scattered if there is no long-term direction of travel from the policy telling this is where we want to be by 2030 or 2050, etc. So there needs to be a policy coherence, and I think that's also a precondition. And for me, in most of the countries, the financial policies, financial regulations are changing. For example, the green taxonomies are coming in so many countries. The subsidies discussion which is the fiscal policy, is also changing. But in most of our countries, the thematic policies, the energy policy or climate change policy or agricultural policy are still sitting in the last decade. So we have to align the thematic policies with fiscal and financial policies to really give that direction of travel to the businesses to focus on sustainable consumption and production as well. So that, I think, policy coherence is also a precondition for this work. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thanks, Ajala. Thank you so much. We are reaching to the end. We have a little bit of time pressure as well. So quickly, now we've been discussing on different aspects, international level, global level, how to integrate this. And we have seen NDC as a policy option to integrate SEP into climate ambition. And we have seen certain challenges and opportunities. Okay, if you want to do that, what would be the steps? What would be the next step for the Central Asian countries if you want to integrate SEP into NDCs?
Yeah, thank you for your question. So, мы думаем, что усиление NDC, ну и, наверное, не только в нашей стране и странах Центральной Азии, но и по всему миру, оно то только будет ужесточаться ввиду того, что сегодня мы находимся далеко от траектории выполнения Парижского соглашения. И это наверняка будет требовать от нас четкого, прозрачного расчета выбросов парниковых газов, когда мы говорим о 3 уровнях: Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. То есть и продвигая эту работу, мы абсолютно понимаем, что проведя эти расчеты, мы понять, насколько у нас уровень потребления в тех или иных вещах высок. И то есть, продвигая, ужесточая климатическую политику в NDCs, мы автоматически, скажем, добиваемся вопросов сокращения, устойчивого потребления и использования ресурсов. Другое дело, самое сложное, наверное, будет здесь, это вопросы методологии, вопросы расчетов. То есть все наши страны на сегодня находятся, наверное, на этапе большой перестройки, когда мы отходим от тех советских технологий, которые мы долгое время использовали, ряд которых уже свой ресурс выработали. И сегодня вот трансфер технологий, а дальнейшая методология расчета этих всех вещей, она будет иметь ключевой характер. Поэтому, реализуя эти вещи, я думаю, мы автоматом уже будем увеличивать и возможности циркулярной экономики, в том числе и в наших NDC. Спасибо.
Thank you, Oljas. So they're challenging pathway, of course, but of course it's an option. So we need to see what are the interim milestones for us. So Zenaida, I think I need to turn at you last. We are running out of time. So you heard what everybody is talking. We discussed the potentials. We discuss about the challenges, we discuss about the opportunities, and we slightly discuss about the pathway we need to move. From your perspective, from the program perspective, what would be the next steps? What we can do together as a program in terms of the collaborations and work?
In a way, Ranga, you highlighted most of the keywords, which of course are fueled by or nurtured by reflections of the colleagues. Now, from our perspective, what is very clear is that when it comes to NDCs, but not only NDC, to various aspects of resource and climate, we have to have much more stronger collaboration, coordination at the national levels in the countries and as well as regionally. So I'm looking with hope at all of the colleagues on the stage, and it is our commitment to touch base after this and see where, how, and who does what clearly, because all of us have a commitment now of working in this area. And we clearly hear from you what would be the potential triggering points of approaching. This is certainly from the program perspective. I already have showed on the slide our perspective, what needs to be done in terms of upscaling. It is market transformation, which is not only about policies. It's about entrepreneurship policy. It is about finance and financing. It is about innovation. So the program will be working on this. And again, we look forward to collaboration, certainly scientific input in this, certainly indication of the pressure points, certainly indication of where those critical resources which would trigger the interest, certainly how the funding would be done, etc. So, but essentially all 3-4 elements of this transformation might must come into the game if we are to shift there. And certainly what you are saying about creating a pipeline is at the core of our grant projects. So the grant projects of Switch Asia are creating investable enterprises or investment-ready enterprises from the perspective of climate and resources. And finally, and I think that the word pathway somewhat there, let me put it in a more technical term. We really need to have roadmaps. We say we need circular economy. Circular economy would look like for this or that, for the tourism or for food or for the building sector. But what would it take? All of the steps of roadmap to reach there. So that's also something which we can probably collectively to look how we could work on that. So it's becoming less of a piecemeal and dispersed range of efforts, but really something quite coherent. And from our side, the promise is to get in touch with all of the panelists and some other people in the audience, as well as with some other partners which we discussed throughout this for a few days. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sinaida. So you made my life easy, so I don't need to summarize anything. You perfectly summarized what we need to do after this. So shall we give a round of applause for the beautiful panelists? So I'm impressed that we managed to be sharp on time, I guess. Thank you very much, everybody, especially the CARAC. For partnering with us to organize this side event. I call it's a kind of a dialogue. It's this dialogue will continue, and if you look at this the panel composition, it brings different aspects and different elements to this whole discussion, but we should work as one unit. That is to take that the task ahead. Thank you so much once again, and let's keep in touch as Sinaida suggested. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks. By the flags, one here.